My name is Alexandra Dean, and I'm the director and showrunner of Secrets of Playboy on A&E.
I was Miss January 1973. My photos were gorgeous. And then I became director of Playmate Promotions. At that point in time, I wasn't interested in marriage, but I was interested in Playboy Enterprises because women were taking their power. They were in command of themselves. So I thought, well, wow, that's good to me. And it went along with the sexual revolution that was going on. I had a lot of power, a lot of freedom. It was freedom, you know?
My bunny name was Bunny Jackie, and I started working at Playboy in 1967 for 11 and a half years. We definitely got paid well, and I bought a car and I lived the way I wanted to. We had more freedom than as a secretary or as a teacher.
It's 1981. I'm in Chicago as the bunny mother. I had 70 bunnies underneath me. We did a lot of things to help rise these girls up. And it was exciting to me because I knew that I could move up the ladder in corporate.
There were often times when I would be interviewed by a strong feminist, and she would come at me really hard. And I would just, yeah, and I would answer and let them know that I was definitely in charge of my life, and this was my choice. Now, of course, it came at a cost, but at that moment in time, I didn't know about that.
Secrets of Playboy premieres Monday, January 24th at 9, only on A&E.
This is Factual America. We're brought to you by Alamo Pictures, an Austin and London-based production company making documentaries about America for international audiences. I'm your host, Matthew Sherwood. Each week, I watch a hit documentary and then talk with the filmmakers and their subjects. This week, it is my pleasure to welcome award-winning filmmaker Alexandra Dean. She is the director of the 10-part documentary series, The Secrets of Playboy, now being released on A&E. Don't let the title fool you. Through her interviews with hundreds of former Playboy playmates, bunnies, and employees, she pulls back the veil on the true nature of the Playboy empire and its founder, Hugh Hefner. Far from being a bon vivant, sexual liberator, and empowerer of women, Hefner was a sexual predator who built a media empire on a web of deceit and a mountain of lies. Join us as we discuss this groundbreaking docuseries, which is likely to prove just the tip of the iceberg in this horrific tale of abuse and rape. Alexandra, welcome to Factual America. How are things with you?
Very good, thanks, Matthew. How are you?
I'm doing fine, and even better now that we have you on the podcast, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to Factual America. To remind our listeners and viewers, the film we're going to be, docuseries actually, is The Secrets of Playboy, 10-part A&E original documentary series. Episodes 1 to 3 have been released. By the time this podcast sees the light of day, I think we'll have episodes 4 and 5. I know it comes out on Mondays at 9 p.m. Eastern. So congratulations again on getting this film made, and thank you again for coming aboard and having a little chat with us. Maybe you can get us started, if you don't mind. What is Secrets of Playboy all about? That's a loaded question, I mind you, but maybe you give us a bit of a synopsis to kick us off.
Yeah, so Secrets of Playboy is really what was happening at Playboy for the last 50 years, mostly from the perspective of the women that were there, but also employees, people behind the scenes. Playboy from a completely different lens than we're used to.
Okay. And how have you come to the story? I mean, what you're a documentary filmmaker, what made you say, I'm going to do a film on Playboy?
I'd done a couple of documentaries that glancingly looked at women and sexuality here in the U.S. I did Bombshell, the Hedy Lamarr story, and that was really about the first woman to do an orgasm on screen and how that basically discredited her for the rest of her life from being taken seriously for inventing something that became one of the bases for Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and GPS and all these things we work today. And then again, with the Paris Hilton documentary I just did, her sex tape had discredited her in many people's eyes for many years and made them doubt everything she said. And she reframed that for me as revenge porn, at which point I started to really wonder, like, about our hang-ups around women who have some sort of sexualized image in the public eye, and how it might be interfering with our ability to see them clearly.
And so is this, I mean, in terms of the timing of this is post Me Too, not post, I shouldn't say post Me Too, but, Me Too.
Me too.
It's, I guess maybe the pandemic's starting to rage. And were you aware of the rumors about, let's face it, this is about Playboy, this is about Hugh Hefner, this is about someone I'm of an age who remembers, I was quite young, but do remember when he was still being held up as sort of a self-styled father of sexual liberation, someone that maybe men might aspire to, even then. Were you aware of, because I might as well say it now, and this will come up, there's a lot of Secrets of Playboy is a very innocuous, benign title for this, I think. There's a lot of bombshells here because you get to the reality of what was happening. And so were you aware of some of the rumors or some of these stories? No, not at all.
I really wasn't. And it's funny, some of the press reaction to the series has been like, oh, we know all this dark stuff was happening in the mansion. And I'm like, you did? Because I didn't. I had no idea. Like, I started really as an innocent calling all these women who had been in the magazine, just sort of saying, tell me about your experience. Yeah. Tell me.
And so that was the movie you as you said, this is the movie you set out to make, to explore this topic. And then at what point do you get to a point you realize this is a very different, or potentially a very different film?
Well, almost immediately I started realizing that there was a huge range of experiences that people had at the mansion, and that there were women who really came through it feeling this was a great experience and it had helped them, truly, and that there were plenty of women who did not feel that, in fact felt some sort of negative attitude. But it was a gradual uncovering. I really truly didn't know all these dark secrets right away. I really I was just wondering how it was possible for women to have such a range of experiences for a long time. And then as the trust built between me and certain characters, more and more kept coming out. And I was really, scrambling to figure out how to make it all part of the story as it kept sort of breaking over me.
Mm. And so you didn't set out to make a 10-part docuseries, I guess, maybe.
No, really, I thought, initially I thought maybe it could be a feature, or maybe 2 hours or 4 hours. Yeah. And then the revelations started happening. And I also started to realize how enormous the Playboy world was. I was trying to talk about something much bigger than Hugh Hefner, the individual. I was trying to talk about the entity he'd built. And that meant the Playboy clubs, and it meant the models in the magazine and the girlfriends. And if you think about it, all of these women have been incredibly iconic, and none of them have really been heard from.
And maybe it's worth taking a step back. I've already alluded to it. What was this? What was this image that American society had of Hugh Hefner and sort of the Playboy empire? I know that's evolved over time, but certainly for the large part of that, there was a sort of a conventional kind of wisdom. Yeah.
The conventional wisdom was that he was the man who had brought about our sexual revolution. He had a lot of credit for that. And that at the same time, he'd been sort of a progressive champion who had promoted women and women's empowerment. And his idea that the girl next door could get naked too and have fun and not be, slapped with some branding of a slapper or a whore. That was really important for the American zeitgeist and psychology.
Yes, and then you bring it up in the film. He was very he had African American playmates and bunnies in the clubs, and very very early very anti, very pro civil rights, and this was an image that, to be honest, I think he actually did
I think he
believe in
believed
that.
it.
Yeah,
I think he
yeah,
believed it. And
yeah.
that's one of the really interesting things about this series is we're not talking about a character that, just does what he says on the tin. It's not like that with Hefner. There seems to be these two sides to him, possibly more. But I'm not sure they were talking to each other, I'm not sure that Hef didn't. Yeah, I think he completely blocked that darker side of himself when he was outside of the bedroom. I think he was and completely inhabited this much more progressive person that people truly loved. And then he had these secrets. He had this secret self. And it unleashed a lot of damage as well.
Okay. And then I think, as I said, there's, each time I've now seen that each time an episode comes out, there's a bit of, creates a buzz because there's, I find them to be bombshells. I mean, let's touch on that. If the media said they knew this all along, what were they doing?
Right. Why weren't they
Why weren't they
declaring all this happened? I don't know. It's so bizarre. I don't know. Why didn't people say anything? Or, maybe it was buzzing around LA. I'm not from LA. I grew up in England. I'm from New York.
Okay.
I've been here for 20 years. I think that people in LA do know more maybe in the whispers of LA, in the whole industry. I didn't. I really came at it from an outsider's perspective, and also from the perspective of someone who had been seduced by Hef as a kid and thought it was pretty cool that all these stars of Baywatch came from Playboy, and they were cute, and I wanted to be cute like them. As an idiot.
Or or you can be a host on MTV, or you can
be a host on MTV, right? You can be super cute and bounce around in a little red bathing suit, and it looked like fun, and it looked like freedom. And I didn't see anything wrong with that from the outside.
I mean, for our listeners, I think I'm not being a very good host of this, in that we're kind of dancing around some of this. But in that, I mean, do you want to maybe just give us a sort of summary in terms of what people are going to learn when they watch this series? Because I've had the fortune of I've seen all the 10 screeners, so. Yes, yes, I put one in for the team. But my goodness, it wasn't. I shouldn't say it wasn't easy watching. Everyone should watch this. There's some very horrific, difficult scenes, and we can talk more about some of the women and what they've had to go through in order to bring this story to life. But what are people going to find out when they watch this?
It's kind of an onion peeling situation. You're going to keep seeing layers of Playboy and its image fall away, and each layer we look at what Playboy was kind of seducing people, what was the seduction of Playboy when it came to like the clubs or the girlfriends or or the playmates, and then we look at inside the mechanics of it. We really see these patterns where women were often not protected from abuse, or sometimes it seemed almost offered up for abuse. And then we kind of get deeper and deeper into what Hef was really up to himself in the bedroom. And we realize that, maybe it wasn't an accident that all this rot was happening in different parts of the Playboy empire. It's because this guy at the center of it didn't seem very worried about protecting women either.
Okay. I mean, I think that's, I should stress, it's not salacious. This isn't, being, we're not, it's actually, I mean, it's like you say, it's unwrapping an onion, and it's actually finally shining a light on things that, for whatever reason, I mean, why do you think this has been so covered up for so long?
I think Hef was enormously powerful. I think he was also a beloved American icon. When you look at American exports, Coke and Disney and Hef, the Playboy icon is right up there with them. It's a big part of our identity. And so I think Hef just became this cartoon character that we love to love. And we didn't really want to look more closely at all the clone girlfriends and the weirdness going on.
I mean, even in the end, he's kind of almost a Mr. Magoo type character. But the clone. I think that's that's a very good point. I think he's how well. Maybe that's something we should discuss when we get after the break. I'm going to let our listeners have a break here. We'll be right back with Alexandra Dean, docuseries, The Secrets of Playboy, 10-part A&E original, and do check it out. If you enjoy Factual America, check out the Movie Maker podcast. That's all one word, Movie Maker, where our friends at moviemaker.com interview everyone from filmmakers just breaking in to A-listers like David Fincher and Edgar Wright about their movie-making secrets and behind-the-scenes tricks of the trade. They go deep and let the guests speak uninterrupted to get you the most film insight. Now back to Factual America. Welcome back to Factual America. I'm here with acclaimed filmmaker Alexandra Dean. We're talking about Secrets of Playboy, the 10-part A&E original documentary series, now out. I think episodes 1 to 3 are already out by the time you listen to this podcast. It will probably be more about 4 or 5. Alexandra, we're talking about, you've been shining this light. Let's maybe I should cut to the chase. I mean, we're talking about these myths of Hefner and Playboy. So maybe we could walk through some of these. I mean, he's the father of sexual liberation, but let's look at that one first. He enslaved women, didn't he?
Yeah, in a way, both are true, right? It's an uncomfortable reality. Sometimes really opposite things are true at the same time. Yeah. Hefner did liberate many women into feeling like they could enjoy their own nudity and sexuality, and that was great. At the same time, he seemed to have a culture at the mansion that was all about controlling his girlfriends, and controlling them tightly in weird ways. Mm. And you do hear from women throughout the decades who compare it to a cult.
Yeah. That comes out a few times, and it's across many different interviews that term gets used. It's all about consenting adults just having fun, but actually, rape's involved.
Right. So we hear early on in the series, one of the journalists that I interviewed said, the philosophy that Hef promoted in the magazine was very explicit. It was something that he'd really worked on. It was a literary feat. And he said in the philosophy, basically, he believed in freedom to do whatever you want as long as you're not hurting anybody. Yeah. That was his philosophy. And, that's what sort of opened the floodgates for a lot of people to sexually experiment, because if they weren't hurting anyone, it wasn't morally wrong in his universe. And the problem is he was hurting people.
Yes.
And maybe not everybody, but he was hurting some people very badly. And we do hear from one of his most long-term girlfriends, who was extremely close to him, thought she was going to marry him and have his babies, and how, and she really takes us through a journey around how damaging he could be.
Is that Sandra Theodore?
That's Sandra Theodore. So she's a very important central character, because she kind of takes us into the heart of darkness of his legendary bedroom and tells you all about it.
Yeah. I mean, you have, I wouldn't say he was never no drugs, but he was always saying there really wasn't any drugs going around, or he wasn't aware of it. But it sounds like they were just popping pills and doing all kinds of stuff all the time.
Oh my God, right?
Yeah.
Episode 4, you'll see, it's all around this battle that Playboy had with the authorities during the Nixon era to try and convince them that they were not this hedonistic playground, that drugs weren't rampant. Yeah. And of course, the evidence that we see in the doc is that they were pretty rampant. And not only that, Hefner was deeply involved in how the drugs were procured.
Right. And that's again in the Sandra Theodore episode, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the Sandra Theodore episode.
Yeah.
So she's a sort of a guide for us, right at the beginning, in the middle, and at the end, really telling us what was happening.
Yeah. And then he's a lover of women, but I think it's in some of the latter episodes. I think more than once, your interviewees say they think he hated women.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a couple of the women at the end of all the interviews, they sat down and said, I really think he hated women. And I think they're saying that because they feel like they witnessed him, and the word they use is break. They witnessed him break women. And it was really interesting because I heard that word from 4 separate interviews, very different interviews, the same word, break. He broke these women. It's a serious allegation. It implies long-term psychological damage and scarring.
And I guess let's put this in perspective as well. These are more often than not, they are women, but they are just become women. There's 18, 19 years old, aren't they? And he's middle-aged at least when this happens.
Right. Well, and he keeps getting older.
And he keeps getting older, and they keep, it's the
Yeah. Yeah,
it's
and
the Dazed
there's
and Confused quote. But yeah,
there is a profile that keeps cropping up as well. In my reporting, I kept coming across the same story. I was 16, I was 17, I was 18, I was scooped up, bought into Playboy. Often, the person who was attracted to Playboy or Playboy was attracted to had some sort of abuse in their own families or in their childhood. So it's a pattern they were repeating, or they were sort of orphaned in some way, and Playboy positioned itself as a new family. And they would very often move in for long periods of time, 9 months to 2 years.
And then I think maybe it's worth, at this point, there are some. Well, what I was going to ask you is, you must feel like you've become an investigative reporter. In some,
that's
some
my
that's
background,
what
to
is
be
it?
fair.
Okay.
Yes, I was a PBS documentarian, and I worked on the news magazine Now, which is investigative, and I did that for the first 5 years of my career.
Okay.
So it was for me, it felt to me like that. Shoe leather reporting is my background. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And then these women there are many women who you interview, many former employees. But what about these women that have come forward or you were able to get in touch with who've, how difficult was it for them to relive this again? Because we're talking about people like Mickey Garcia, Sandra Theodore, P.J. Marston, just to name 3, but those are 3 of your main characters.
Yeah, P.J. Marston, yeah. It was incredibly difficult for all 3 of them in different ways.
Yeah.
And Jennifer Saginor,
Yes.
begins the series and comes back later. And Susie Krabiker comes up in the end, that also one of my main characters. All of these women, it was a really long dialogue that we had. Yeah. And what you are seeing isn't one interview, it's often 4 or 5 over a long period of time. And it's like boxes within boxes are being opened up. People would call me and say, I've just remembered something. Oh my God, I've remembered something. Or more often, I think I'm ready to tell you something that I haven't wanted to share. I'm so scared, but I think I'm ready to tell you. I think it's important I tell you.
Yeah. And some of them have, like Sandra Theodore, she's got children. She's, it must be, it can't be the easiest thing.
No.
Obviously,
For Sandra, that was a huge struggle. Yeah, she had kids, and the kids didn't really know her relationship with Hef. Like, she'd really kept this veneer that it was all okay, and it was to protect them. She didn't want them to know how bad it had been. Yeah. But I think I think it's actually been healing in some way in her family for them to find out the truth.
Well, probably helps explain some things too, doesn't it? What you have some incredible scenes. PJ just goes to the garage. She's there in the Villages and in Florida, and she just goes to her garage and starts pulling things out. There's even that one. I think it's the one on drugs, where not literally on drugs, but the one about drugs, where the guy, you've got these former detectives, and they've kept a lot of these notes. And they've got their own investigative notes and things. It's quite incredible.
Yeah. That was so lucky because, it's during the pandemic. So we don't have any else, nothing else to follow for Verity. Right. What have you got in your garage? Can we squat over some boxes with you? Yeah. And, but it did become really interesting. It taught me a lot, actually, as a documentarian. There was so much in the boxes in the garages and in the photo albums. And also, we began to really look at videos, movies with people, and you see that a lot. You see them watching their own images and their home movies and things.
And there's something about an image that just brings everything, or a film that just brings everything back, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's interesting the way we projected Sandra's old films. They kind of slid across her face, and I realized it looked like memories.
And ones that I think it's in the last episode actually, where she basically thought she had repressed many of them. And,
Yeah, she'd repressed them for sure.
yeah,
She'd had such a hard time reconciling the two sides of Hef for herself, and so
yeah,
she had to kind of shut down part of herself. And she talks about all her struggles and all the ways she realized she was repressed and sort of breaking down for a long time.
and there's that word break again. I mean, because that's what comes up. I mean, as you say, um, what we see unfold is through their testimony, how Hefner and his cronies, as his group circle, push these women to breaking points. And you just a few minutes ago reminded me. There's the other character haven't mentioned, which is incredible. I know she's written a book and that's out there, but you have Jennifer Saginor, who grew up
Yeah.
in the Playboy Mansion.
Right.
You
We
know,
start with her because she's this innocent, you know,
yeah,
a little kid, really truly an innocent, wandering through, you know, Hefner's Shangri-La, which looks to her like Disneyland,
right.
until she starts opening doors and stumbling on what's happening behind the closed doors. So I thought it was, you know, her story is incredibly poignant, and it was a very moving way for me to sort of uncover the mansion through her eyes and start to see some of the things that were maybe going wrong.
And what about some of the? I mean, the women we're talking about were someone like Mickey Garcia. She's a former employee, but I mean, but the non sort of bunny employees like the valet and the butler and the security guards. You know, how do they feel? I mean, you know, in the guilt that comes out. I mean, they obviously, you know, why, you know, because they kept silent at the time. And how do they, I mean, it kind of comes out, but how did they, you know, in filming and talking with them, how do they feel about that, and how do they reconcile that?
Every person was different in how they processed all of it, and some people seemed to be in denial about parts of it for sure.
Yeah.
And it was easier to just kind of drink the Kool-Aid for some people and be rah-rah Hef. And I see that a lot in the Playboy universe. People don't really want to confront the dark side. It's too painful. But I did, you know, really find that some of the employees who really confronted what had happened there had these really raw emotional moments where they confronted their own complicity, and they had to stop, or you know, you see one of them say, "You can stop filming me now. I'm sorry," you know, and this
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
expression of pain comes over his face.
And I mean, what's the reaction been? I mean, besides, you know, we get some of these stories drop on each episode, and there's a bit of a media buzz with each episode. But what is the reaction? Because I think I saw something that how it's been interesting to see how Playboy reacts.
Right. Playboy surprised us by completely coming out in support of the women and saying, you know, we are not affiliated with the Hefner family anymore, and we do completely support the women who've come out and support their stories. And honestly, I thought, you know, what a marvelous way to react. It was really impressed me deeply, and we did in fact put it in the film at the end. You see a card where their reaction is there for everyone to see.
Okay, and you said they're not affiliated with the Hefner family anymore, and that it's a question even someone now I know asked me. I do remember at some point, I don't know how old I was, but there was this. They're making a big to do about the fact that Hefner's daughter was going to take over, you know, the running of the magazine and everything, Chris. But she just seems to, and even in your doc, she just kind of disappears. I mean, what happened? Do you know what happened with that? Because it strikes me as a very strange. All of Hefner's relationships seem to have been very strange, but that seems like a strange one as well.
Yeah, the famous line of Christie's is, "If I hadn't existed, my father would have had to invent me," and that's what
Yeah.
Hefner would say to her.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because he was so savvy and he understood that putting his daughter at the front and helm of the company was incredibly good for the company, right at the moment where it was kind of under fire for being anti-feminist,
Right.
or against women in some way. He would say, "No, my beautiful daughter is the new head of Playboy, and how could it be anti-women when she's at the helm?" But I think it wasn't, a completely easy atmosphere for her, from what I can gather. I think, I think that she wanted to do a lot of things with the company that the old guard probably wasn't really happy with. And in the end of the day, when private equity took over a lot of the company, she left, and I think she'd had enough.
That's and I what is a I think I was telling someone beforehand. You don't see many 10-part doc series anymore, but this one actually, but I think it definitely justifies 10 parts. There's a lot there. You cover a lot of ground, and I think you're only hitting the tip of the iceberg in many ways.
Yeah,
But
that's the crazy part, right?
isn't that? No, it is. I mean, that
Really,
was
just the
meant. It wasn't
beginning.
meant as a criticism. I mean, I think you had so much material. You've done an amazing job putting it all together and peeling that onion. But you have a whole one of the episodes very much focused on the company culture, and so again, it's not just Hefner; it's the whole corporation. I talk like someone who has an MBA, and unfortunately I do. But I've got you've got this whole thing where this is what they're saying, but what's actually happening, and the glass ceilings that were in actually definitely in place, even though the women didn't realize they were there, and then the steady diet of harassment and that they had to deal with in their positions. It's quite
Yeah, it's sobering.
yeah.
I think that all of those aspects of Playboy were very interesting to me, because that's really the world I came up in, where it was like, on the face of it, very, very equal and very,
Yeah.
pro women, and then you would smack your head against the glass ceiling every once in a while by accident and just come out of it like woozy, and wondering what happened. So I think those women in that corporate story really struck a nerve with me. They had it much worse than my generation did. Their harassment was really overt. But it still lingered when I was coming up, and I did recognize that whole thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important to talk about. It's not just like the really obvious stuff, but it's also how this attitude that Playboy had, that women were disposable, kind of dripped through every part of the culture.
And yet what you also uncover is all the cover-ups that the great lengths they would go to make sure no bad press would come out. Hence the discussion we've had earlier about how did we not know about this?
Right. The cover up, the cleanup crew. Yeah,
The cleanup crew.
That
Yeah.
episode's just come out. Yeah, the cleanup crew was a thing, and you see me kind of incredulously asking
Yeah.
one of the security men, like, "Is this true? The cleanup crew? Like, can you confirm the existence of a cleanup crew?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, that's
Yeah,
true. That
and
really
you,
happened."
and you were probably expecting to say, no, what are you talking about? But now he's like, yeah,
Yeah.
no, I was on it or something,
Oh yeah, I was part of the cleanup crew, and so is Mickey, and so is,
Yeah, they all were part of it.
those
Everyone
crew
you've been
to make
talking
it.
to was on the cleanup crew, essentially.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and that's why they were so disturbed. Like, if you want to know why these people and not those people at the mansion,
Yeah.
of course the people on the cleanup crew saw all the worst stuff, and
Yeah.
a lot of the other people were shielded from it.
Okay. And then, I mean, I don't think, well, I'm not sure exactly. I'm trying to remember, but there's, there's things that come out about people who are still alive, especially about some men. I mean, have you, how have you dealt with it so far, and what are you expecting to be the reaction about
Yeah.
that?
We did not make any allegation that we couldn't corroborate many different ways.
Given
We
your investigative
Yeah, we did not
back
do
then.
that because that would be nuts.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and so I know that people wonder, like, why do we name these people and not those people in an episode?
Yeah,
It'll always be because what could we do legally?
yeah,
There are legal hurdles to overcome, there are investigative hurdles to overcome. You have to have other sources. So where you hear somebody alive and allegations against that person coming to light, you should know there is a lot more that I know than that. A lot more.
Right,
It's much
right.
deeper than that. This is the tip of the iceberg, so that's why we went forward with it.
Okay. And exactly. So there could be, well, I mean, I don't think I will get into trouble. It won't, and no one will be surprised if I say, Bill Cosby is one of the people that gets discussed. So, and in horror, unfortunately for one of his victims, and she has, she does share in utmost detail what the experience. But I think, I mean, as you say, so if that's the case, you must, are you living with the burden on your shoulders? You must have, there must have been a lot of names that have been mentioned that you are pretty sure probably did the things they've been accused of, but you are not in a position to, well, as you say, for many reasons, and rightly so. I think, let's put it that, I also should say, every episode, I forget how many times says, well, certainly at the end, there's always a title card saying, these people have never been tried in a court of law. There's no been accusation.
Yeah.
I guess we should also say, just because you're seen in a photo that you happen to be at a Playboy club doesn't make you guilty, obviously, because it was part of the culture.
That's right. And there were many men that I know went there for a long period of time who did not become predators or engage in predatory activity. Yeah. So for everyone listening out there, don't just assume because you see somebody at Playboy they were a predator. It's not true. But yes, there were some for sure. And when it came to Cosby, he, the allegations against him spanned 50 years at Playboy.
Yeah.
So for me, that was important to look at because it kind of started to lead to, well, what did Hef know? But he really have missed all of these allegations over all of these decades against the same man.
Yeah. And I think that's a good point you make as well, which is you had the people who could go to the clubs, they had certain access. You even looked at a bunny wrong, you could get turfed out. And then you had these friends of Hefner, sorry, not Huff, but Hefner, wrong celeb. But Hefner, who, it were kind of told carte blanche, anything goes, seemingly.
There's this weird hierarchy at Playboy that you see kind of in all different situations where there's the rules for the ordinary folk. And then there's the rules for the VIPs, who are often celebrities or somebody close to Hef or, somebody big in some other part of culture. And they can do whatever they want. Like, all the rules are suspended for them, and it's really a playground for them. And I think that was in place because it made Hef feel special. He could offer all these really big names somewhere that was just a free playground for them. And they all came and made him feel like king of that playground of special people. So, yeah. He kept it going.
Yeah, and I think, as you point out, I mean, there was Playboy, there was the clubs, there were the mansions, but then there was this sort of, it became a haven for a certain type of man, didn't it, in terms of a part of his inner circle. And I don't think it's been really said, but I mean, you even point out that this wasn't just happening at the mansion. This was being replicated across L.A. at least, wasn't it?
Right. Yeah, one of our episodes is really, we go back to Jennifer Saginor, who, we met in the first episode. She comes back towards the end to say she's sort of kept doing her research, and she discovers that there's this kind of network of mini mansions, which like mini Playboy mansions, which we also call shadow mansions in the episode. But it's all her concept of the mini mansions, which she was recognizing as smaller versions of the Playboy mansion because she knew everyone from the mansion, and she realized it was run by people connected to the mansion, and they were kind of replicating what they saw happen there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that does remind me. I forget her name. It doesn't actually matter so much. But you were talking about this selective memory thing. There's one of the former employees. I think she's a photographer, and she even kind of, I wouldn't say she's disparaging, but she does say about one of the playmates. I think one of Hefner's girlfriends that you talk about that maybe casting doubts on her motivations or things like that. And then in a later episode, she just barely avoided getting raped by one of Hefner's inner circle. She gets left alone with this guy and gets attacked. Yet she kind of seems to shrug it off. But it's a very interesting, dynamic that even she wasn't safe.
Well, in her mind, Hef protected her from that situation, that she had been put in that situation by Playboy at large, and Hef protected her. So you can see the complexity here of this situation. It's really complex, and it's a complex thing to navigate as a woman and to see to see clearly, I think, in some ways. And I think what that points to also is that we as women, we often process exactly the same situation very, very differently. And we assign blame differently. We tend to judge each other a lot. I find that a very, very painful thing, that women can go through the same assaults and assign blame to each other. I think that's really hard for me to see sometimes, but it's true. It happens.
And do you think that's partly that also gets to this whole element of why it's taken so long for this story to come out as it has? Because not only, as you said, I mean, there's also this element of self-blame, isn't there? That happens. I must have been at fault, almost self-victim blaming,
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of that. There's a lot of that. Playboy had the reputation in Vegas, right? What happens at Playboy stays at Playboy.
Right.
And so a lot of women felt if they had walked through the doors there, they had brought this upon themselves. And what's interesting is I think until very recently, our culture would have wholeheartedly agreed and said, shut up and never tell us. You walk through those doors, you take responsibility for that. And I think now we're just beginning to say, wait a second, you can sign up for a wonderful, playful, joyous sexual experience, and you don't have to be responsible for being crushed and ending up with PTSD.
Yeah. Right. And do you think that is do you feel like that is actually, maybe it's just the beginning, but it is a change that's actually going to happen? This isn't just something that's, hopefully it's a change that's going to happen, but I mean, it isn't just going to be stuck at, an era, 1 or 2 years there where names, people get brought to sort of responsibilities for this, and then we kind of, there's no going back to that era. That some of this seems so almost anachronistic, doesn't it? I mean, in terms of where we are now versus what was going on in the 70s, 80s, 90s.
It does, but I also am a believer in, The Handmaid's Tale. I think we can slide backwards very easily.
Okay.
The history of women is the history of all of these incredible strides forward, followed by these terrifying slides backwards. If you're watching Catherine the Great right now, you know what I'm talking about. She's like the era of Olympe de Gouges and the rights of women, and then we know what happens after that. They all end up in corsets and stuffed in untidy marriages and things. That's, women have gone back and forth. I don't think that the place we're at is ever guaranteed. We have to fight for it.
And with that in mind, what do you want the legacy of this docuseries to be?
A little more freedom. I want women to feel free to speak up about their experiences. I want people to feel a bit more open-minded about what these experiences are really like. And then, I want to hopefully help at some point create a more free world where people can experiment in a space that actually is a bit more safe.
And it seems, I think it's in episode 10, which I've had the good fortune of seeing. Mickey Garcia, Sandra Theodore, they all are now saying, we hope more women, more victims will come forward and be in a position to tell their stories. Have you seen any signs of that yet? Yeah.
We certainly have. We have heard from a handful of victims since the show started airing, and some of them have called Sandra or Mickey directly. In Sandra's case, I know one woman said, shaking and crying, "You've changed my life. You've made me able to tell my story, which I thought I would have to keep locked up for the rest of my life." And that's like a jail sentence for her, apparently. So
Yeah.
I think that's why we do this. It's a freedom for people.
Okay. Will you be revisiting this story, you think, or is
I don't
that
know.
it's a lot to put on your shoulders?
It's a lot. I don't know. It depends what comes out, If I feel like there's something there that we haven't covered that really needs to be told, I would certainly consider it. But there's also a lot of other stories I want to tell.
Yes, and what I was going to ask, and we're coming to the end of our time together, but what's next for you?
I'm not sure I haven't out yet, but I am working on I think I can say I'm working on 4 parts for a big streamer, and 4 parts is very comfortable after 10. It's wonderful. It's a great size playground. I'm enjoying it a lot. Again, it's a woman we all know, and it's a completely different angle on her. Again, there's a lot of scandal and a lot of prejudice. We're going to tackle it head on.
Intriguing. Well, I can't wait to see it when we finally do get to know who the subject is, and hopefully we can have you on again sometime. It would be great to discuss that, and good luck with your career, and good luck with and congratulations on this series, and thank you for bringing this story to our attention. I think it's long overdue. So thanks again so much. Alexandra Dean, acclaimed filmmaker of Secrets of Playboy, 10-part A&E original documentary series.
Thanks so much, Matthew.
Hef pretended he wasn't involved in any hard drug use at the mansion, but that was just a lie. Quaaludes down the line were used for sex. Everything felt good to touch, everything felt soft and soft focus, and it was lovely. Usually you just took a half. Now, if you took 2, you'd pass out. It was such a seduction, and the men knew this, that they could get girls to do just about anything they wanted if they gave them a Quaalude. Before I met Hef, I had never done a drug in my life, and I was just a young, naive girl that didn't know the ways of the world.
I worked for Hefner at the Playboy Mansion in LA from late 1977 to mid-1989 as Hef's secretary and then eventually executive assistant. Quaaludes were, we called them the leg spreaders, and I don't know that I want to get that crude, but that is what the whole point of them was, They were a necessary evil, if you will, to the partying. We would have prescriptions in some of our names. There were prescriptions in Sandra's name and Hef's name and my name. There was a prescription in Mary's name. We kept a desk calendar that just would say, Lisa's Q or Hef's Q or Sandra's Q. That enabled certainly 4 and sometimes 5 different prescriptions for the same medication to feed the machine.
Secrets of Playboy premieres Monday, January 24th at 9, only on A&E.
I'd like to give a shout out to Sam and Joe Graves at Intersound Audio in Eskrick, England, in deepest, darkest Yorkshire. A big thanks to Nevin Apaunovich, podcast manager at Alamo Pictures, who ensures we continue getting great guests onto the show. And finally, a big thanks to our listeners. As always, we love to hear from you, so please keep sending us feedback and episode ideas. You can reach out to us on YouTube, social media, or directly by going to our website, www.factualamerica.com, and clicking on the Get in Touch link. And as always, please remember to like us and share us with your friends and family, wherever you happen to listen or watch podcasts. This is Factual America, signing off. Page is alamopictures.co.uk.